In the early years of World War II, the United States arsenal was often dismissed by seasoned European commanders. The American military-industrial complex, still emerging from the shadow of the Great Depression, produced weapons and vehicles that many in Europe considered untested and inexperienced. Across the Atlantic, German and British officers watched the United States' rapid militarization with skepticism, questioning whether mass-produced firearms and mechanized units could match the precision and experience honed in the trenches of Europe. Yet behind the doubts, a quiet revolution was underway. By 1941, the U.S. had already begun to prepare for a war that seemed inevitable. The Lend-Lease Act, passed in March, sent thousands of rifles, trucks, and artillery pieces to allies, but American weapons were often criticized for being bulky, unsophisticated, or unreliable under battlefield conditions. German propaganda seized upon these reports, mocking American designs as toys for amateurs. The M1 Garand, semi-automatic and advanced beyond most bolt-action rifles of the time, was met with disbelief by some European officers who saw its rapid-fire capability as unnecessary and potentially flawed. Tanks like the M4 Sherman were branded easily destroyed in theoretical exercises, and yet these judgments relied on assumptions rather than actual combat performance. Across the Pacific, the U.S. faced similar scrutiny. Japanese officers dismissed American naval gunnery and aircraft as slow and inaccurate, underestimating both the industrial output and the adaptability of the U.S. Navy. Early confrontations in the Philippines and the Pacific Islands reinforced these assumptions as the Japanese celebrated initial victories against unprepared American forces. Yet the U.S. was learning quickly, adapting tactics, improving logistics, and mass-producing weapons at a scale unseen in Europe or Asia. The industrial backbone of America, its factories, assembly lines, and workforce, would soon challenge every preconception about its military capabilities. By late 1942, the first fully equipped American units arrived in North Africa, joining the British Eighth Army against Rommel's Afrika Korps. Allied commanders observed the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and doubt. The U.S. soldiers were well supplied, but many feared that inexperienced troops, combined with weapons that lacked a battlefield pedigree, would falter under real combat conditions. Early skirmishes around Oran and Casablanca confirmed these fears in some minds. American tanks struggled in the desert heat, trucks overheated under the punishing sun, and supply lines were often stretched thin. Yet the soldiers adapted, learning quickly how to operate in unfamiliar terrain. Weapons that had seemed unwieldy in training began to prove effective in combat. On the Eastern Front, German observers compared the new American models to their own, often ignoring the speed at which the United States could replace losses. While a panzer division might boast superior armor and firepower, it relied on intricate supply chains and experienced crews. The U.S. approach was different. Standardized weapons, modular production, and interchangeable parts meant that losses could be replaced almost immediately. Rifles, machine guns, and artillery pieces flowed from U.S. factories in quantities that no European power could match without mobilizing an equivalent industrial effort. The skeptics, however, focused on quality over quantity. British and German officers predicted that the M1 carbine, with its lighter caliber and high mobility, would fail against entrenched German positions. They criticized the Sherman for its thin armor, claiming it could never withstand a Tiger tank's main gun. These assessments ignored a key factor. American doctrine emphasized maneuver, combined arms, and massed firepower rather than individual duels between tanks. The U.S. had developed a philosophy that integrated infantry, armor, and air support to compensate for perceived deficiencies in any single weapon system. Meanwhile, American scientists and engineers were quietly pushing the boundaries of technology. Prototypes of the bazooka, high-velocity artillery, and improved aircraft engines were tested and refined, often under combat conditions in North Africa and the Pacific. Feedback from frontline troops fed directly into production decisions, accelerating improvements in real time. By the time the Allies prepared for Operation Torch and the eventual D-Day landings, American weapons had matured beyond the early skepticism of European observers. Yet reports from the front lines continued to reach Washington. Skepticism lingered among those who had not witnessed the results firsthand. The irony was clear. Nations that dismissed U.S. weapons often underestimated the combination of industrial output, logistical efficiency, and tactical adaptation. While German generals calculated the effectiveness of individual tanks and rifles, they failed to account for the relentless American capacity to produce, distribute, and replace. In the deserts of North Africa, the jungles of the Pacific, and the beaches of Normandy, this miscalculation would soon manifest in brutal clarity. By late 1943, the stage was set. American forces, initially dismissed as inexperienced and poorly equipped, were ready to confront the Axis with an arsenal both vast and evolving. Every rifle, every tank, and every aircraft carried the weight of industrial might behind it. The world was about to witness what critics had ignored. The combination of innovation, scale, and human resilience could turn doubt into decisive power. And in that crucible, the effectiveness of American weapons would no longer be a question. It would be proven by fire. This realization would come in moments of intense confrontation, where strategy, technology, and human courage intersected on the battlefield, forcing even the harshest skeptics to acknowledge the lethal truth. The human angle is where the story of American weapons comes alive. In the deserts of North Africa, a young private gripping an M1 Garand could feel the difference immediately. Unlike the bolt-action rifles used by most European armies, the Garand allowed for semi-automatic fire, 8 rounds in rapid succession without manual cycling. Soldiers described the sensation as a surge of confidence, a subtle reassurance that they could hold a position under fire. Letters home from the front often mentioned the M1 carbine as a lightweight, reliable companion, especially during long patrols or sudden skirmishes in unforgiving terrain. These personal accounts would later contrast sharply with the early skepticism of foreign observers who assumed that inexperienced troops could not leverage such technology effectively. Tactical perspectives reveal another dimension. German field reports noted the increasing efficiency of American units, particularly in combined arms operations. Early clashes demonstrated that American forces relied on coordinated infantry and armor maneuvers, rather than isolated engagements. Shermans, though outgunned individually by heavier German tanks like the Panzer IV or Tiger, could operate in large, flexible formations. Massed Shermans, supported by artillery and air cover, created overwhelming pressure on enemy positions. The quality versus quantity argument began to collapse as Allied commanders witnessed the tactical ingenuity of American soldiers who used mobility, suppressive fire, and coordination to offset any technical shortcomings. Even modestly armed units could punch far above their weight when properly integrated. From a technological perspective, the story is equally compelling. Early critics focused on armor thickness or rate of fire without recognizing the rapid adaptation of American engineering. The Sherman tank, initially criticized for vulnerability, saw continuous upgrades, improved engines, better suspensions, and specialized variants like the Firefly, equipped with high-velocity cannons. Aircraft, such as the P-38 Lightning and the P-51 Mustang, introduced range and performance capabilities that gave American pilots a decisive advantage in escort missions over Europe. Bazookas and high-velocity artillery allowed infantry to neutralize enemy armor in ways previously considered impossible. Each innovation, tested under harsh conditions, highlighted a key difference. The United States viewed weapons not as static instruments, but as evolving tools refined by feedback from the battlefield. Leadership perspectives underscore the broader strategic vision behind these weapons. Generals like Dwight D. Eisenhower and George S. Patton understood that industrial capacity was as critical as battlefield skill. Patton, initially skeptical of certain U.S. designs, quickly adapted to the strengths of mass-produced tanks and mobile infantry. Decisions at the command level emphasized rapid deployment, flexible logistics, and relentless pressure on enemy forces. This leadership philosophy magnified the impact of each rifle, tank, and artillery piece. Where European commanders often prized elite units or technical superiority, American generals leveraged scale, mobility, and integration to achieve results. The enemy angle completes the picture. German and Japanese forces often underestimated American weapons and the soldiers who wielded them. Early intelligence reports predicted catastrophic failures under sustained fire, yet encounters repeatedly defied expectations. German war diaries from 1943 and 1944 frequently noted surprise at the resilience of Sherman units and the suppressive power of American artillery barrages. Japanese reports after the battles of Saipan and Guam expressed similar astonishment at the effective coordination between infantry, armor, and air support. The discrepancy between expectation and reality revealed a critical flaw in Axis assessments. They evaluated weapons in isolation, ignoring the human adaptability and industrial scale driving American effectiveness. Morale emerges as a subtle but decisive angle. Confidence in weapons translated directly into confidence in the mission. Soldiers equipped with Garands, Thompsons, or bazookas reported feeling more capable, more willing to take initiative in dangerous situations. Conversely, skepticism from allies or enemies could be turned into propaganda victories or, when proven wrong, devastating psychological blows. By 1944, reports of U.S. weapons effectiveness had circulated widely, both boosting American morale and eroding the certainty of Axis forces. Numbers on the battlefield began to tell the story that rhetoric could not. Even within a single engagement, these angles intersected seamlessly. A Sherman crew, relying on technological upgrades, could execute a tactical maneuver devised by their commander, bolstered by the trust inspired in them by reliable weapons. Meanwhile, enemy observers could only record their surprise as plans unfolded, unprepared for the scale, coordination, and adaptability displayed. Human, tactical, technological, and leadership perspectives converged to create a force whose effectiveness was not measured by initial skepticism, but by the stark reality of outcomes on the battlefield. This multifaceted perspective sets the stage for moments of confrontation where doubt turns to undeniable evidence. Across North Africa, the Pacific, and eventually Europe, American weapons, once dismissed, would prove themselves in ways that reshaped strategy, morale, and history. The next chapters of the war would hinge on decisive actions where preparation, ingenuity, and industrial power collided under fire. The moment of truth came in the deserts of Tunisia, late 1942. Operation Torch had brought U.S. forces into North Africa, and the skepticism of seasoned Axis commanders was about to collide with the relentless reality of combat. On the morning of November 8, 1942, American troops landed on the beaches of Oran, Casablanca, and Algiers. The initial landings were met with sporadic resistance, but it was inland, in the harsh, sun-scorched landscapes, where the weapons would be truly tested. Shermans rolled across sand and rocky terrain, their crews discovering both the limits and strengths of their machines. The M1 Garand rifles allowed infantry to suppress enemy positions with continuous fire, while bazooka teams engaged German armor with a mixture of daring and precision. Every engagement revealed that American weapons, when combined with coordinated tactics, could hold their own against forces previously thought superior. The clash intensified during the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943. American units faced the elite 10th Panzer Division under Erwin Rommel. Early reports painted a grim picture: inexperienced troops, thinly armored Shermans, and the risk of annihilation. In practice, American soldiers adapted quickly. M4 Shermans, while outgunned by German panzers, utilized mobility and massed numbers to delay advances. Infantry, armed with Garands and Browning automatic rifles, held key choke points, buying time for artillery units to deliver suppressive fire. For the first time, Allied commanders began to see the value not only in the weapons themselves, but in the integration of technology, tactics, and human initiative. Even when facing the superior firepower of German tanks, American forces refused to break. The initial heavy losses, painful as they were, became lessons in resilience and adaptation. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 offered a different but equally decisive test. Japanese defenders expected U.S. Marines to be easily repelled, underestimating amphibious assault technology and fire support coordination. Landing craft approached the reef under relentless artillery and naval bombardment. Marines armed with Thompson submachine guns and M1 Garands surged onto the beach under a hail of enemy fire, supported by flamethrowers and rocket launchers that neutralized entrenched positions. Each weapon, dismissed by observers as impractical or insufficient, proved lethal in the hands of well-trained soldiers. The casualty rates were high, but the Americans adapted tactics in real time, using smoke, suppressive fire, and armor support to breach defenses that had seemed impregnable. European soil would host the ultimate proving ground. By June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings, combined all aspects of American weaponry, strategy, and industrial preparation. Beaches in Normandy, heavily fortified with mines, artillery, and machine gun nests, became arenas for relentless combat. M4 Shermans navigated obstacles with engineer support, while M1 Garands and Browning bars provided suppressive fire for advancing infantry. Specialized tanks, such as the Duplex Drive amphibious models, facilitated beach assaults previously thought impossible. Commanders on both sides quickly realized that dismissing U.S. weapons was no longer credible. Across Omaha and Utah beaches, every rifle, cannon, and tank became a decisive instrument, validating years of preparation and industrial effort. Even in smaller engagements, the turning point was evident. The Mark 14 torpedo, initially plagued by mechanical failures, became a reliable naval weapon by 1943, reshaping submarine warfare in the Pacific. Aircraft like the P-51 Mustang escorted bombers deep into German territory, neutralizing Luftwaffe threats and tipping air superiority in favor of the Allies. These technological victories, combined with human adaptation and leadership decisions, produced a cumulative effect. Axis forces were forced to acknowledge that American weapons were no longer theoretical, they were decisive. The psychological impact was equally profound. German commanders, who had once dismissed American arms as toys, began to adjust tactics, deploying heavier units and concentrating fire to counter what they now considered a serious threat. Japanese strategists, too, were forced to adapt to amphibious operations and air superiority that American weapons enabled. Across theaters, the numbers told the story. Sherman tanks could survive ambushes when properly coordinated. Infantry could outpace enemy expectations with semi-automatic rifles, and combined arms operations could overcome fortified positions. By mid-1944, the cumulative effect of these turning points was clear. The skepticism that had greeted American weapons with laughter and derision had been replaced by cautious respect and, in some cases, fear. Battles like Kasserine Pass, Tarawa, and Normandy demonstrated that industrial output, technological innovation, tactical integration, and human adaptability could turn initial doubts into battlefield supremacy. Weapons once dismissed as inadequate had become the backbone of operations that reshaped the trajectory of the war. These decisive moments paved the way for the Allies' continued advance. Every rifle fired, every Sherman rolled, and every aircraft soared was a testament to preparation, resilience, and the quiet efficiency of American production. Skeptics could no longer ignore the reality. The combination of scale, innovation, and human determination had transformed weapons from simple tools into instruments of history. And with that transformation, the path to victory became tangible, setting the stage for the aftermath that would redefine both strategy and the perception of American military power. The consequences of these battles were immediate and stark. In North Africa, the defeat of Axis forces in Tunisia by May 1943 marked the first major validation of American weapons on the global stage. Reports from Allied command detailed thousands of German and Italian casualties, combined with the capture of vast stores of equipment. Sherman's and American artillery, once dismissed as inferior, had contributed decisively to holding flanks and breaking enemy lines. Soldiers' accounts described moments where semi-automatic rifles and bazooka teams turned the tide in localized skirmishes, proving that speed, firepower, and coordinated tactics could overcome numerical and technical disadvantages. Across the Pacific, Tarawa, Saipan, and Guam left similar impressions. U.S. Marines endured high casualty rates, yet the effectiveness of American weapons was undeniable. Japanese fortifications, previously considered impregnable, were systematically neutralized. Naval gunfire, tanks, flamethrowers, and infantry rifles worked in unison, creating results that contradicted early skepticism. Military analysts in Washington noted the transformative role of combined arms. Individual weapons mattered less than how they were deployed. By late 1943, U.S. military reports emphasized that battlefield adaptation and industrial scalability were as decisive as individual technical superiority. In Europe, the Normandy landings brought this truth into sharp relief. By the end of June 1944, American forces had secured beachheads under firepower and coordination that overwhelmed German defenders. Sherman tanks, often underestimated for their armor, survived encounters with enemy anti-tank guns when deployed en masse and with supporting infantry. Aircraft, including P-51 Mustangs, maintained air superiority, enabling the safe movement of troops and supplies. Allied after-action reports highlighted that American weapons, integrated with effective logistics and leadership, had transformed assumptions about combat effectiveness. Commanders who had doubted U.S. equipment were forced to reassess, acknowledging that industrial output and tactical doctrine could outweigh the supposed technical edge of enemy forces. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate victories. German war diaries, intercepted intelligence, and post-war memoirs reveal a growing recognition of the Americans' industrial advantage and battlefield adaptability. For Axis forces, early derision of U.S. weapons became an uncomfortable acknowledgment of reality. The enemy could replace losses, innovate under pressure, and maintain relentless operational tempo. Skepticism was replaced by cautious respect and, in some cases, a sense of inevitability regarding American influence on the war's outcome. Statistical evidence reinforced the perception. By mid-1944, American production figures were staggering. Thousands of M4 Sherman tanks, hundreds of thousands of rifles, and tens of thousands of aircraft had been deployed. Losses were rapidly replaced, and improvements to weapons were implemented in real time. Soldiers' reports, battle logs, and official evaluations consistently demonstrated that American armaments, once dismissed as amateurish, were now central to operational success. The combination of scale, reliability, and adaptability had reshaped strategic calculations across both European and Pacific theaters. The aftermath also shifted military doctrine. Allied forces increasingly emphasized mobility, combined arms coordination, and industrial exploitation as decisive factors. German and Japanese commanders, faced with overwhelming resources and adaptable tactics, were forced into defensive postures. The lesson was clear. Weapon quality alone did not determine battlefield outcomes. Integration, production capacity, and the ability to adapt under fire had emerged as equally critical, if not more decisive, factors in modern warfare. The stage was now set for the final campaigns in Europe and the Pacific. American weapons, once dismissed as untested or insufficient, had proven their effectiveness not in theory but in the harsh reality of combat. They had reshaped perceptions, bolstered morale, and validated strategies. And as the Allies prepared for the push into Germany and the closing battles in the Pacific, the lesson was unmistakable. Dismissing American weapons had been a grave miscalculation. In the end, the story of American weapons in World War II is not merely about steel, firepower, or numbers. It is a story of perception, transformed by action, of doubt, shattered by results. The rifles, tanks, artillery, and aircraft that were once dismissed by seasoned commanders became instruments of decisive change, proving that innovation and scale could alter the course of history. Every soldier who relied on an M1 Garand, every crew navigating a Sherman across sand, mud, or cobblestones, contributed to a legacy of resilience and adaptability. The lessons extend beyond the battlefield. Modern warfare, then as now, is defined as much by logistics, production, and integration as by the individual qualities of weapons. The United States' ability to mass-produce, refine, and deploy effective tools under the pressures of combat demonstrated a principle that would shape military thought for decades. Skepticism, however strong, cannot substitute for observation and adaptation. In the deserts of North Africa, the beaches of Normandy, and the islands of the Pacific, that truth was written in fire and steel. And yet there is a human story woven through the machinery. Courage, ingenuity, and relentless determination turned tools into forces capable of shaping history. The young soldiers, engineers, and commanders who embraced these weapons under harsh conditions proved that human will, paired with technology, could overcome doubt and redefine expectations. The world would remember not only the battles won, but the quiet revelation that what was once underestimated could become decisive. Dismissal gave way to respect, and skepticism transformed into acknowledgement of capability. In every sense, the weapons of the United States, once mocked, became a testament to the interplay of innovation, perseverance, and human courage, a truth written indelibly across the battlefields of the Second World War.